Hi everyone, and welcome to the weekly predictions based on astrology, and these are predictions for the week of December 30th, 2019. So first, let's review global transits that are affecting pretty much all the countries globally and for the entire week. One, we have continuing transit of Pluto and Saturn conjunction in Capricorn, and that typically coincides with major geopolitical changes, tensions among various countries, and also various, disasters, accidents on the global scale, like large earthquakes, mudslides, problems related to maybe old buildings collapsing, and also coincides with either beginning or ending of large infrastructure projects, perhaps, like building a bridge, building a railroad, tunnel, etc. And let's see, this week, the strongest dates for this influence, which, like I said, it has been spanning for some months and it will continue into 2020. The dates for this week are 2nd and 3rd of January. Another something to note is that between about December 29 through, I would say, about January 15 of 2020, especially 9th through the 12th of December, it will be a really sort of important time where this conjunction becomes really close, and there will be additional aspects to it. So this kind of a stressful energy or energy of important events, it doesn't have to be stressful, it will become even more important or even more, powerful. And so indeed, during those times, like I said, especially 9th through the 12th of January, we may expect an array of important events that affect people globally, something along the lines, like I said, major earthquakes, collapses of important large buildings, be it because, again, of the earthquake, or perhaps they're demolished, again, on purpose to build something better, bigger, better in their place. Similarly, important leaders, Queen of England comes to mind, or somebody who is of an important stature, like a president or a powerful leader of some sort, may step down, be removed, replaced, or perhaps their power, their status changes significantly. And of course, vice versa, new leaders may arise. And as I said before, this is an influence where, even if it's a change for good, for example, some sort of a new scientific breakthrough is announced or a new project begins that, involves building things for a long time. However, if these things are done well, they may stand again for a long time, for decades. So whatever leaders, for example, that are new leaders that will come on at this time, they will also be in power for a long time. So this is a change that is, something old going away, but also something new may come in, and again, it stays if indeed, the foundation is built correctly. So some manifestations, and again, they can start already this week into early to mid-January, could be disaster of, like I said, earthquake, and something involving like mountains, underground locations like tunnels, mines, etc., mudslides, storms, power losses, contagious sort of disease epidemics becoming kind of more prominent in the news, even, as bad as a nuclear accident, problems with like recycling plant, or, like I said, a mine or some underground storage, for example. Some geopolitical changes may involve, multiple countries, either forming a new bloc, separating from a bloc, changes in the status of a particular entity that's part of maybe one group of, states and becoming a part of another group. So something like that, borders basically redrawn, redefined, and not just redefined, but also actually legalized, and, that may affect things like status of, citizens of that country, or how, say, travel or shipments legally can be conducted. So maybe new ways are opened up for people who couldn't travel before, and vice versa. Those who could, perhaps now they're facing increased obstacles, or they need to comply with new regulations. Let's see, another possible probability is that, again, leaders stepping down or even violently removed or passing away, leaders who are, again, leaders themselves who are old, really powerful in place for a long time, and or leaders, heads of companies that have to do with, say, mining, steel, construction companies, power companies, isn't like producing power, recycling, those kind of areas, also oil, and also any sort of heads of like agencies that have to do with like spying, hacking, Secret Service, things like that. So at the same time, there may be increased scale, large moves in the stock market, and initially they may be down. By initially, I mean like at the end of the year, 29, 30, I guess 31st perhaps, but then they will, the market will reverse up. Certainly for this week, I think 30th and 31st will be down. Monday, the first market is closed because of New Year, and then the end of the year, 2nd and 3rd, I think market will go up. But as far as the 9th through the 12th of January, I think the market may also go up at that time because I think there will be some sort of either finalization of something, or perhaps again some large events, and maybe first initially investors may be scared because again of the magnitude of events, but I think once legal agreement or legal papers or legal status of whatever they say, new leader, etc., has changed, market will go up because again things have stabilized and things are legally in place. Other positive kind of manifestations that may occur at this time, meaning end of December through about mid-January 2020, are perhaps, like I said, scientific breakthroughs. They may relate to recycling, mining, or cleaning up pollution, especially from power plants, or it could be something that again involves generating power, or perhaps a new way of, some sort of new chemical that can be added, to when the steel is produced to make it stronger, or something along the lines of some sort of scientific breakthrough that involves, making things stronger, lasting longer, and or being able to use in kind of a large scale projects, infrastructure projects in particular, so that things can kind of withstand more, they can be more durable, hold up to some external pressures, I guess, or weather, problematic weather longer. And or it could be something along the lines that something is excavated from the earth, so maybe like archaeological find, or there's an earthquake and earth basically opens up and there's something there, or perhaps from under the sea, or something is kind of maybe have been discovered before, be it scientific breakthrough or discovery literally in the earth, but then now at this point it may be sort of announced and brought to public attention. And or there may be some important agreement where perhaps there was a standoff or conflict between some countries, and finally it is comes to an end, as in like at least temporarily, because something is finalized, and so at least temporarily there is no like confusion about what the status is. So as I mentioned, for each individual day of the week, Monday, Tuesday, I think market will go up, and then break on Wednesday, and Thursday, Friday look really good. In particular, we have some important aspects to both USA and China's chart astrologically, and so it looks like really important agreement, which of course we all know from the news. I guess there's some agreement either pending or being discussed or has been signed. I'm not sure exactly the details, but the 2nd, especially 3rd of January in the morning, New York time, looks like something may be announced, or the final kind of a legal settlement reached, and it is going to be important for, like I said, both US and China, and there could be perhaps the nature of the agreement for US, it looks like it may be something that's there's a lot of optimism, a lot of hype, and maybe to the point where something is kind of too hyped up and too optimistic, to the point where details and fine print are overlooked, and or the timeline is kind of too optimistic, or something that requires kind of stretching things to too far than the country normally would go for. So there's some imbalance there. And for China, it also looks somewhat imbalanced, where this kind of a twist is a little bit different. The imbalance for China looks that the agreement is not the way that typically the country would enter into agreement. So typically, again, based on astrological chart only, no other analysis, went into this. Just based on the chart, looks like China typically would approach partnerships where sort of in this kind of a royal magnanimous kind of a way, or if not magnanimous, powerful way, and kind of either partnering with somebody who's really powerful or playing this powerful role. And here things would be like there's some sort of imbalance and maybe some compromises, but again requiring sort of stretching and kind of not quite following the goals that the country really would like to see for itself. So perhaps maybe it's a good thing, maybe both countries are compromising on something in order for the agreement to be reached, but either way it seems to be from each country's kind of perspective, something is it's not exactly for China what they wanted, and for US it looks like they're kind of stretching themselves a little bit or being a little bit optimistic, and perhaps when some details come up or some timelines will come up where, okay, now that we have an agreement, how exactly will we implement things? Those details may kind of be less clear, or that sort of that's when that over optimistic approach may have a downside, because maybe timelines may not be met, or things may sort of require overspending and overstretching in order to achieve those goals. Let's see, for Monday, I also made a prediction, and I already posted it the day before on my blog at plasunka.com. I haven't seen it exactly in the news, but again, I didn't really have time to thoroughly look at the news. But what I saw was that there might be a possibility that a well-known male leader or somebody who is masculine may be featured in the news more prominently. Perhaps it would be a government, official, or somebody who is, representing a well-established corporation, or the corporation has to do with like steel manufacturing, mining, etc. And that person may be perceived as either too old, too conservative, too rigid, not reacting emotionally, kind of warm emotional way enough, and so they may receive some negative publicity from the public by being basically too, I guess, rigid and not really going with the flow, or not really feeling it, so to speak. And let's see, so other announcements for Monday, I did see partially, I think that came true, that there will be some news about the gold value, solar power, and or entertainment industry. There might be some minor news, and to the point where maybe these areas at this point may be seen as slightly less attractive or less available than usual, meaning perhaps they're not going to be seen as, at this point, like where the investors won't necessarily pour lots of money in, or be that interesting. Again, just a temporary for this week. I did see news about gold value, I guess, going down overall for the day, but it's actually went up for the last several weeks, I suppose. So maybe that's it. Maybe that's the, because things are kind of at the higher price. So maybe for temporarily things may cool off there, just because it is not going to be as attractive, simply because, again, it may be perceived as kind of at the higher price. So people may wait for it to fall down to invest again. For US, Monday may bring negative news, or some sort of concerns about healthcare, social services, workforce, any type of areas where the focus on caring for older people or people with some sort of needs, or any sort of service industries. So there may be some news about either agreements, among companies in those areas are not proceeding as smoothly as needed, or perhaps if maybe workers are demanding increased compensation or some services to be provided that maybe they're not quite getting that, or that some deal is not being reached due to like differences in communication styles or in values. So again, it's not a very strong influence, just a minor kind of a disruption there. Let's see, then, as I said, nothing special of note for Tuesday other than the ongoing background influences. And for January 1st through 3rd, I think that there will be increased news during that time. And specifically, it will be focused on international agreements and deals of any sorts, major deal or law may be announced, and or there may be some major announcement regarding, some international relations or travel, immigration, or just involve individuals who are and like some professors, lawyers, judges, or representatives of the companies that involved in long distance shipment and travel, and or the announcement may be made at some large international gathering, some conference like that. And the announcement may be about increase in offerings by these kind of areas, by these businesses, or there being new cool gadgets coming up, new leaders, new important research projects, especially if they relate to mining, metals, and minerals, maybe, building a railroad that obviously requires a lot of metal and involves long distance transportation. Or expansion of these kind of companies from these areas, or agreements leading to expansion of businesses to overseas, more locations, especially with partnering internationally, opening up more outlets, increased sales, again involving sort of international trade, more travel destinations, more international partners, etc. So definitely there will be an element of international, relations, as well as something being legalized. And so it will be either the fact that it's going to be a legally binding agreement, or that the announcement will specifically involve people who are like judges or lawyers. And the announcement will potentially be seen as either unpopular or coming at a bad time. And perhaps initially that kind of attitude will be because the announcement needs to be seen as there's not enough detail. So there's a change, but perhaps it's not quite aligning with the initial objective of, say, agreement, or of what maybe there's a trial, or what the law was meant to be passed for. So there's something that's out of alignment with what the initial purpose of it was. And or perhaps the purpose is fine, but the details are missing, or rather the details kind of contradict what the overall sort of objective is presented as. So for example, the outcome is somewhat unexpected, so the agreement is signed, but the outcome is not quite what public was looking for, was expecting to hear. Or if there's like a professor comes up with some sort of research, it could be that they were looking to find one thing and they actually found something else. And that may not be necessarily a bad thing, but it could be sort of a disappointment in the sense that it's not really what the research was looking to find, or there was a surprise there, or perhaps that the announcement or agreement or expansion, for example, in say overseas, omits either particular area, like maybe it's not expanding into certain locations, so there's disappointment about that, or maybe either research or agreement either omits or excludes, or somehow forgets, about certain details or some group of people or certain topic, like maybe an agreement is signed, everybody's sort of hyped up about it, but certain topics that were expected to be included and covered by the agreement are not, or certain groups of people, maybe it has to do with maybe immigration or transportation, are not covered at all, so there's confusion about what their status will be, or that, they're not treated the same as everybody else. So on the January 1st and 2nd, initially we may hear about sort of general picture of either an agreement or this announcement with kind of a large view, I guess. And on the 3rd of January, details may come in where we may hear more about like how will actually things proceed, what are the actual findings, what is the fine print. And so initially there may be focus on specifically legal issues, legalizing things, kind of getting international support and the community to agree on something. And then on the 3rd, the issues may be focused, or the news may be focused on like actual implementation of the agreement on sales, how to specifically conduct things, who will be moving where, like which products will be sold for how much, how to transport the goods, how to communicate about things, how to keep track of the progress. All these kind of finer details will come in, and of course those are a little bit harder to digest, and there will be slightly less, involving slightly less hype and more of a practical kind of thinking. Let's see. And then in general, like I said, I think it will be overall a positive time, and not only this specific announcement, but it could be in parallel with this or as a part of this announcement. As I said, there'll be some geopolitical changes where even announcement itself may trigger or somehow affect status of some areas or some regions, and that may be a long-term effect on them where it may be literally for decades, felt for decades in the future. So that's it, and I did already for this week I did post already my predictions for 2020, so please go and enjoy those as well. And I guess I'll see you guys all in New Year, and Happy New Year, everyone.